Welcome to week 16 of the Bible reading plan. And I've got my friend Lee Pounds here. And we are ready to rock and roll. Hope you guys are staying with the Bible reading plan. Do not quit. Keep reading all of it every single week. Because it's the Bible.
It's a marathon, not a race.
It's a marathon, not a race.
Yeah.
And if you haven't kept up, just jump right back in. We're going to say that all year long. We're going to keep on saying, jump back in.
Of course, marathons are races.
They are races, yeah. But it's a slow and steady. Slow and steady wins the race.
All right, yeah.
All right, what we got up first?
Let's see. I think we talked about our application, or no, it's going to be our highlight to start off, right?
Yes.
Highlight, shadows, and applications.
Mm-hmm.
Our highlight, I was looking at Psalm 67.
Yeah.
And, we have the praise and worship song that I'm not going to bore anybody by singing. But, it's always encouraging to me whenever I'm reading scripture and I think, oh my goodness, this is exactly where that song came from, is in Psalm 67 is one of those. And I think the song is called May the Peoples Praise You.
Yeah.
But, I love praise and worship, and this psalm is basically that song. There's not a whole lot in that song that comes from anywhere else, really, but definitely the chorus part of it. So, let the peoples praise you, O God. Let all the peoples praise you. And then it goes back. Let the nations be glad and sing for joy. So, there's always those moments where we need the praise. And this is one of the shorter psalms. Psalm 67 is really short. That is the prerequisite to a really long psalm of Psalm 68, right?
Yeah.
So, but we do.
Long psalm.
Yeah.
I thought you were saying long song, because that is, May the Peoples Praise You is a long song.
That's true, but it's on one of the shortest psalms.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
I don't know. But long psalm of 68 is pretty long as well. So, but a good highlight is a good worship. And I think, especially the season we're coming through Easter, and really, we're still in Easter season, in my opinion. We're technically in Easter season year round. I don't know why we have to have these Super Bowl Sundays of the Christian world where we have these big Easter moments, But yeah, it's a good season to be praising.
Yeah, it's Resurrection Sunday every single Sunday, right?
Exactly.
We don't have to just do it one time a year. We can celebrate the resurrection all year long. And this whole idea of like praising God before all the nations runs all throughout the Bible. In Isaiah it says, that the Israelites are to be a light unto all the nations. Paul picks this back up in Romans chapter 15 and verse 9. He says, "Therefore I will praise you among the Gentiles," which that word in the Greek is ethnos, and you could it's sometimes translated as like nations or like ethnic groups. Mm-hmm. I will praise you among all the different ethnic groups and sing your praise to your name. And again, rejoice, O Gentiles, with his people. I think some translation actually say nations. This is the ESV. But anyway, this theme of rejoicing through, and praising God and letting the people praise the Lord among all the nations runs all throughout the Bible. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, even that line, the nations will be glad. I'm sure in the psalmist era it was about the nations of Israel, but, through Jesus, complete work and ministry, we have all the nations. We all have reason to be glad in the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm. And is coming back again.
Yeah,
when he will reign, on earth with justice and peace.
Yeah.
All right, let's move along to the Shadowland time.
I'm definitely letting you take this one.
I hope I don't say this. I'm going to try to say this in a not weird way. Try to not make this weird.
Okay.
But anyway.
As long as there's no demonstrations, we'll
No,
be okay.
we won't not. We're not going to demonstrate this. Oh, if you're a listener, you are in suspense right now. I know, but it's Isaiah 20, and Chuck, who told us if we did not talk about this, then he's gonna be upset.
Okay.
So we're talking about this.
All right.
In Isaiah chapter 20, there's a little strange scene in here. And I'll just start reading at verse 2. At that time, the Lord spoke by Isaiah, the son of Amoz, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from your waist, take off your sandals from your feet. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. Then the Lord said, As my servant Isaiah has walked naked and barefoot for 3 years as a sign and a portent against Egypt and Cush, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptian captives. So we have Isaiah, who the Lord told him to walk around naked and barefoot, and he did it for 3 years.
You stop short, I think, of some
Oh,
good
well,
verse.
yeah, and then he keeps going and says, lead away the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles, both the young and the old, naked and barefoot, with their buttocks uncovered, the nakedness of Egypt.
There you go.
You just wanted the word buttocks.
I did. I wanted
Yeah.
you to say that.
You don't come across that word much in everyday life anymore. So we got this whole Isaiah walking around naked for 3 years, and studying this, which was fun to study. There were some Bible commentators who were like, now he literally didn't actually walk around naked for 3 years for like 24 hours a day.
Okay. No,
Did you read something else?
I've read that he could have,
He could have, but there's nothing in the text that says he never wore a stitch of clothing the whole time.
So the one thing I read said that he could have, but it would have been more than likely a loincloth.
Right.
It would have still been, bare buttocks, but
Buttocks.
yeah, but he would at least have a loincloth.
Yeah.
So
But he would have done this like the majority of time. It's another parallel of this is Ezekiel laying on his side for 390 days. Now, he probably would have had to have actually gotten up to do some things
at some point,
to like go to the bathroom or
especially if they're going to follow the cleanliness laws and all the things
Yeah.
that come with that, like there's so much that goes on for Isaiah to stay clean that he would have had to wash himself at some point.
Right. Yeah.
There's, I think his, he would have had less to wash, I guess, in this scenario, but
But so what Isaiah is basically doing in this whole thing, he is acting out his prophetic message that he had given to Judah. So a little bit of background on this whole scene is Assyria is in power. Assyria has already defeated the northern kingdom in 722 BC. This scene in chapter 22 is taking place around 711, 712. So, 10, 11 years after the fall of the northern kingdom. And so Assyria is like the big kid on the block around there. And some of the regions in the southern kingdom and in Philistia, like where modern day Gaza is, they started to rebel against Assyria, and they started wanting to make alliances with Egypt, which Egypt was not super strong right now. They would eventually be defeated, and they started making an alliance. This one city called Ashdod made an alliance with Egypt, and they were completely destroyed. And so Isaiah is his message to Judah and King Hezekiah was, don't depend on Egypt to deliver you from the Assyrians, because they won't. And so his acting out his prophetic message by being naked was often whenever captives were taken away in battle, the captives were, didn't have any clothes on. And it was a way to shame them. It was a way of having power over them. And so that's what Isaiah was saying to the people of Judah and to King Hezekiah. It's like, this is what's going to happen if you put your hope and your trust in Egypt and in this military alliance with Egypt. It's not going to work out for you.
Yeah, they're going to send them away as captives, right? So, like through, it says right there in verse 4, so the king of Assyria will lead away stripped and barefoot the Egyptian captives and the Cushite exiles. I'm not going to read it, even though I made you read it. And then verse 5, those who trusted in Cush and boasted in Egypt will be dismayed and put to shame. So, I mean, yeah. And I think another thing that helped me in what, I wasn't able to get as deep into it, I think, as you were. But one thing that helped me is just understanding how the breakdown of Isaiah and like what's going on at this point, because it's a big book, a whole lot to unpack. If you have not gone and done the BibleProject.org and done the video for at least Isaiah, but they do a phenomenal job of breaking down the books and kind of putting everything where you can understand chapter by chapter kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
Well, we are in the middle right now in Isaiah, which is Isaiah 13 through
39.
Yep.
Or something.
But it's the message to the nations.
Right.
And so 19 and 20 go together. This is the message really ultimately about Egypt and how putting their faith in Egypt is not the way to go.
Right.
So.
And then, eventually, Assyria does not defeat Jerusalem. Jerusalem holds them off, but eventually Babylon is the one that defeats the southern kingdom, and then they do eventually go into captivity, which takes you through a lot of Isaiah up until chapter 39. But
which it's ironic if you think about it. They're considering putting their faith right back in, under the service of Egypt,
who they were in bondage
right?
for. It's crazy.
I know,
yeah.
And so it's amazing how they can lose their faith and lose their trust in God like that. And and honestly, it's a good picture for us.
Yeah,
we're not different.
Yeah.
So
Isaiah just was in a dramatic way. It was an attention-getting type of statement, to walk around naked, and just a dramatic way of trying to tell the Judeans and Hezekiah that, hey, look, if you don't put your trust in just the Lord and Him alone, then this is what you'll end up looking like. You'll end up as an exile and a captive. So.
I know this is not our application, but it just kind of occurred to me. Be the kind of a good example of this would be like a pastor maybe talking to somebody who is struggling with addiction, and he paints a picture of hey, this is what your life will look like if you put your hope and faith and trust in this, in your addiction, in your need for alcohol, or whatever the case may be. You will be destitute.
Yeah.
If you leave what is right, and that is what following God, putting God first, and it's kind of that's a good example, I think, of what Isaiah is doing.
Isaiah's trying to play the tape out for him. Yeah, fast forward to, and that's what prophecy is. Yeah. Is it's, hey, we're going to fast forward. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen if you keep on down this road. Yeah. And they eventually do end up like this. The sin cycle of Israel, keeps going for another 100 or so years until Jerusalem finally falls, and they do go to the 70 years of captivity in Babylon. But naked Isaiah. Yeah. I was not. It's one of those little tidbits where I'm like, have I read this before?
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm not sure.
don't-
Which is what's great about this Old Testament reading plan is there's a lot more of that kind of thing than when we did the New Testament last year. And it's just fun because, like, you think, I've read the Bible so many times, you know? And then when you're reading through the Bible and there's all this new stuff that you're like, I didn't know this. It makes it just keeps it fresh, you know, so.
And I think the way we're breaking it up with the Old Testament over the course of a year, instead of doing a full Bible over the year, it is a little bit of in smaller chunks where this is maybe something that I would have honestly probably just grazed over. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we made it a shadow, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think that would be easy to do. I think, but in this mode of what we're in the reading plan that we're in, I think it makes it a little bit easier for this type of thing to be like, wait a minute, I'm going to take some time to figure out what's going on here.
Yeah. Slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That brings us to the last part of our application. And we're going to be in Leviticus 13. And Leviticus 13 is one of those chapters that when you're reading through it, you're like, what in the world do I need all this for? Tell us a little bit, give us a little intro for it.
Of Leviticus 13?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just really talking about, you have the skin diseases. So we're part of the cleanliness portion of Leviticus towards the tail end of it. If you don't have a Bible dictionary,
Yeah.
you need one.
Yeah.
So that's 2 plugs for Chuck, I think.
2 plugs for Chuck. Yeah. He likes to bring the resources
Yeah,
in.
if you don't have one, you need one. And honestly, Leviticus is a good book to go through the Bible dictionary with. It breaks down a lot of things to make it a little bit more clearer. But this is definitely part of the process and the ritual associated with the cleanliness as far as leprosy or any skin diseases. I think scale diseases might be in here. That might be in chapter 15 or 14. But yeah, it's basically just diseases of the skin. So, and then kind of the process that they would need to follow. But Jason, you had a really good connection point with how this applies to what we have today. I hope not many of our listeners are dealing with leprosy right now. But
Yeah, so I mean, when you're reading through something like this in the Old Testament, your immediate thought is going to be, why am I going to read a huge long chapter on how to deal with leprosy and how to deal with the, if the skin looks like this, if it's red in color, then you need to do this, and this is how you need to clean yourself, and you need to wait, 6 days, for this, and all this detailed stuff.
we have a shot for that now.
Yeah, you can just go to the doctor. So how does this point to Christ? We believe that all of the Bible points to Christ. How does this particular thing point to Christ? And we know it does because just like leprosy, there's a direct parallel to sin. Leprosy and sin, they both bring judgment on a person. They both bring isolation on a person. When a person has leprosy, they have to isolate themselves from the community. They can't be in regular communion with their community because they can spread it. And then there's also an element of how sin and leprosy bring shame to a person too. And Christ, he reverses all of those things. Christ, he brings not judgment, but he becomes the judgment for the person. And because of the work of Christ on the cross, we are acquitted of our sins. We are pardoned from our sins. And then Christ also brings us back into community with God. Instead of being isolated and separated from God because of the work of Christ, we are brought near, and we have that bridge back to God that's made possible by the shedding of Christ's blood, and because he took on our uncleanliness, because our sin has made us unclean, he took that upon himself on the cross, and because of that, we are made clean and washed by his blood. So when Christ sees us, he sees the righteousness of God. He sees the life that Christ has lived, and we actually get to claim the faithfulness of Christ as if we did it ourselves, which is mind-blowing.
Right.
So we are clean then. And then we also, Christ reverses the shame part, and we see that we have just incredible worth as adopted sons and daughters of Jesus Christ, as it talks about in Galatians and as it talks about in Ephesians chapter 2. We're seated in the heavenly places with Christ, given this place of honor. And we're a royal priesthood and a holy nation, a nation of priests. And so we see that sin and leprosy have this direct parallel, but Christ comes and just, takes what is unclean, us and our sin, and makes us clean.
Man. And you know what's great about that connection is that in just 2 chapters after this, in Leviticus 16, we have like the feast or the atonement, forgot the direct name of it.
Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
You talking about that?
Yeah. So like you have that ritual that comes along where they have their Holy of Holies where the priest would go in and, they have the sacrifices. There's 3 sacrifices technically. There's the bull that is sacrificed for just the priest and his family. And then you also have an animal, or I think it's a ram, because there's 2 rams. And so the first ram is the sacrifice before anyone touches it, so that it is clean.
Yeah.
And it's sacrificed. That blood is then what we would, for lack of a better term, like a spiritual sponge that gets taken into the altar and spread on the holy place and the holy seat. And then also they take that mixture of the bull and the ram's blood and cover the other ram, which they call the scapegoat, to send them off into the wilderness.
They let them go.
Yeah. And so what you just described of what Jesus has done for us, and he's done that. He is somehow both the high priest and also the sacrificial ram that covers us, the scapegoat, and protects us from our sin.
Yeah, he's the sacrificer and the sacrifice at the same time.
Yeah, and so he's made what is unclean, because the scapegoat could be, that the people of Israel, missed a key part, would actually come and touch the sacrifice to basically symbolically say that my family's sins are now imparted upon this animal, right? And so I'm casting my sins, and then now the blood covers that animal, and it's sent off into the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so Christ is that blood for us. Like we don't, that animal didn't deserve that.
Yeah, the animal didn't do nothing.
Yeah. And so,
man, that's a great direct, picture of what Christ has done for us. That's wonderful. And, Jesus, his ministry was a touching ministry. And so going back to the whole clean, unclean thing, if you touched in the Jesus time when he was on earth, if you touched somebody who was leprous, you would be unclean, ceremonially unclean. But yet Jesus did this. It's recorded in the Gospels. He touched a leprous man, and he was healed. And he was always healing people with his touch. And, we all need a touch from Jesus.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. I think, and that's just something that you can get hung up on the physical aspect of that, physical healing. But don't lose sight of the fact that just having that personal relationship with Jesus Christ is a touch to the eternal and the restoral of the communion we have with God. People forget, I think, a lot of times that we were meant to walk with God. And Jesus' sacrifice is what parlays us to be able to do that one day again, and really today.
Yeah.
Through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so, and then you talked about how that the touching thing, like, having a touch from Jesus Christ. And this is a weird segue, and we can cut this out if we need to. But, I think about like the road that Jesus took to end up eventually hanging on a cross, and all the people that he had to touch along that way that were plucking his beard out and hitting him and
Spitting on him.
yeah. And, and yet those were the very sins that he was dying for.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it's amazing.
So
All right, that is another one in the books, and you can experience a touch from Jesus by being active in His Word this week.
Yep.
So, I encourage you to get to know Jesus more by staying in His Word and sticking with the Bible reading plan. All right, we'll see you guys next week.